War destroys cities. It crushes industries. Millions of people can lose their homes, their jobs, their savings overnight. But look a little closer at the history of war, and you notice something strange. In the middle of that same destruction, some people get incredibly rich. This has always made me wonder, while everyone else is getting poorer, who's actually getting richer? The thing is, it's all in the war economy. When a war breaks out, the government suddenly needs massive amounts of equipment, fuel, food, transportation, raw materials. It's a scale of demand you just don't see in peacetime. During World War I, this reached a level never seen before. Governments, armies, businesses, workers, banks, all of them got reshaped and bound together around the needs of the war. Actually, the logic is simple. The government needs supplies. Companies produce them. The government pays. That's it. Companies that can meet this demand suddenly find themselves in a completely different economic world. But watch out. That doesn't mean everyone gets rich. If you look at the research on Germany, you actually see the opposite. Economic historians Jörg Batten and Rainer Schulz studied this, and what they found was that only a small fraction of firms actually profited from the war. The rest, just like the workers, they lost income too. So the real story isn't war enriches everyone. War just changes the rules of the game. That's all. Sectors tied to military demand suddenly become indispensable. Companies supplying scarce materials, transportation, industrial production get huge orders from the government, but businesses serving ordinary consumer spending, they're fighting a completely different war. Resources get funneled to the front, shortages emerge, the government takes control of prices and trade. While a country is being destroyed, some businesses inside that same country are growing. It makes you wonder how something like that even happens. World War I also sparked what would later be called war profiteering. In Britain, people grew suspicious of companies that seemed to be raking in excessive profits in the middle of a national crisis. It wasn't really about whether businesses were allowed to make money. The real question was whether it was acceptable for some businesses to make unusually large profits off goods that people desperately needed. And that question is still relevant today. Where exactly is the line between legitimate trade and profiteering? Here's a truth that often goes unnoticed. War doesn't just move money from one pocket to another. It rewrites what an economy considers valuable. Factories land new contracts. Some sectors suddenly become vital. Banks grow more powerful. Workers shift into booming industries. At the same time, other businesses fall behind because they're now producing something nobody prioritizes anymore. That's exactly why a company can get richer during a war, while the country itself gets poorer. A weapons factory might turn a profit, but the resources used to make that equipment could have gone into homes, infrastructure, things people actually needed. So war can create winners, but that's not the same thing as a victory. World War I is the clearest example of this. While a handful of firms cashed in, the broader economy suffered a massive collapse. Maybe the question we should be asking isn't, does war make people rich? The real thing to pay attention to is, when an entire society gets reorganized around a war, who ends up gaining economic value? The answer lies in the very structure of the war economy. Once the government suddenly controls a massive amount of spending, businesses that position themselves closest to that demand get extraordinary opportunities. And here's the uncomfortable economic truth about war. It can destroy an enormous amount of wealth, while, at the exact same time, generating enormous income for a tiny select group. So the winners and losers of a war aren't always decided on the battlefield. Sometimes they're decided by who controls the factories, the contracts, and the financial networks behind it. What do you think about all this? Let's talk in the comments.